In this video, I will discuss the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, Gatt, General Agreement on Tariff and Trade. The General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, the predecessor of WTO. So this is the earlier form of World Trade Organization. And this was born in 1948 as a result of the international desire to liberalize trade. So there was an international desire to liberalize the trade, to free the trade of all controls. And from that desire to liberalize the trade, the idea of Gatt came into existence in 1948. The Gatt was transformed into a World Trade Organization with effect from January 1995. So in 1995 January, Gatt was transformed into World Trade Organization. So today we have no Gatt. Instead of Gatt, we have the World Trade Organization. The WTO, which is a more powerful body than Gatt, has an enlarged role than the Gatt. So today, the WTO has become more powerful, and WTO today enjoys a lot of powers and areas to control than what the Gatt had just before 1995. So simply, WTO has become more predominant, has become more, has an enlarged body, having a enlarged role compared to the Gatt. India is one of the founder members of the IMF, World Bank, Gatt, and the WTO. So India is a signatory of, or it has been a signatory of all these organizations. Now, what are the objectives of Gatt? The preamble to the Gatt mentioned the following as its important objectives. Of course, the first one is raising the standard of living of the people across the world. Second, ensuring full employment and a large and steadily growing volume of real income and effective demand. So increase in the income of the people, ensuring full employment and ensuring a good effective demand. Third, developing full use of the resource of the world. Fourth, expansion of production and international trade. So these are the important objectives of Gatt: raising the standard of living of the people, full employment, growing income, effective demand, and full use of the resources of the world, expansion of production and international trade. What are the rules governing international trade? The rules or conventions of Gatt require that any proposed change in tariff or other type of commercial or trade policy of a member should not be undertaken without consultation of other parties to the agreement. That means when a country introduces a tariff or any other type of trade controls, it should discuss or consult the same thing with other members of the Gatt, with other parties to the agreement in Gatt. That means no country can undertake a tariff policy without consultation of other countries. This is first principle. Second, the countries that adhere to the Gatt should work towards the reduction of tariff and other barriers to international trade. That means there must be a progressive decline in tariff and other barriers to trade. So these are the two important rules governing international trade as far as the Gatt is concerned. For the realization of objectives, Gatt adopted the following principles. So we have listed certain objectives of the Gatt. These are the objectives of the Gatt. To realize these objectives, Gatt adopted the following principles. The first one is the principle of non-discrimination. That means there should not be any kind of discrimination means between the countries. The principle of non-discrimination requires that no member country shall discriminate between the members of Gatt in the conduct of international trade. So in the conduct of international trade, there should not be any discrimination. To ensure non-discrimination, the members of Gatt should agree to apply the principle of most favored nation, MFN, to all its trade partners. For example, if India and Pakistan are in Gatt, then we must apply the principle of MFN towards each other. So we must say that Pakistan is our MFN, and Pakistan must accept that India is their MFN, most favored nation. So we should agree to the principle. It means all members of the Gatt should agree to the principle of most favored nation. And this agreement, this principle of most favored nation will avoid any circumstances leading to discrimination. So to avoid discrimination, each member country is expected to adopt the principle of most favored nation to all its state partners. Second important principle which the Gatt adopted for the realization of its objectives is prohibition of quantitative restrictions. Gatt rules sought to prohibit all kind of quantitative restrictions on trade. Third, consultation. Gatt rules sought to resolve disagreements in trade between nations through consultation. So if there is any disagreement, and that disagreement should be sorted out, should be resolved through consultation. But the evaluation of the Gatt. The growing acceptance of Gatt is evinced by the increase in the number of signatories, means increase in the number of the countries signing Gatt agreement. That shows an increase in the acceptance of Gatt. When the Gatt was signed in 1947, only 23 nations were party to that. Only 23 nations signed the Gatt agreement in 1947. But in July 1995, there were 128 signatories to the Gatt. That simply shows that Gatt had gained a good acceptance among the countries in the world. In 1947, it was formed, or it was signed. Agreement was signed by only 23 nations. But in July 1995, the number of nations signing the agreement actually increased it to 128. That clearly shows an increase in the acceptance among countries in the world as far as the Gatt is concerned. This is very important when we discuss the Gatt agreement. The Uruguay Round, or UR, it is simply known as UR. The 8th round of the multilateral trade negotiations, which is simply called MTN, was held under Gatt in Punta del Este in Uruguay, a developing country, in September 1986. Therefore, this is known as the Uruguay Round. So 8th round of multinational trade negotiations of Gatt was held in Uruguay, a developing country, in 1986. Therefore, this round is known as UR Round. Because of the complexities of the issues involved and the conflicts of interest among the participating countries, the Uruguay Round could not be concluded in December 1990 as was originally scheduled. So it was originally scheduled that the Uruguay Round would be completed by December 1990, but it could not be completed because of the disagreements or conflict of interest among the member countries. When the negotiations dragged on, that means when the negotiation didn't reach a conclusion, Arthur Dunkel, the then Director General of Gatt, presented a draft act embodying what he thought was a result of the Uruguay Round. So when the Uruguay Round was not completed by December 1990, Arthur Dunkel came out with a draft embodying what he thought was the result of the Uruguay Round. This draft, which Arthur Dunkel made, and that draft has come to be popularly known as the Dunkel draft. So what is Dunkel draft? Dunkel draft, it was a draft act presented by Arthur Dunkel, the Director General of Gatt, including the result of or including the consensus that arrived at Uruguay Round. But that was not final because the countries didn't agree with these things. By December 1990, countries could not arrive at an agreement. But Arthur Dunkel, meanwhile, presented a draft act embodying what he thought would be the result of the Uruguay Round. This has later come to be known as the Dunkel draft. This was replaced by an enlarged, modified final test. So the draft was modified and enlarged by a final test, which was approved by delegations from the member countries of the Gatt on 15th December 1993. So a final test actually replaced this draft on 15th December 1993. The Uruguay Round sought to broaden the scope of multinational, multilateral trade negotiations far wider by including new areas. So this Uruguay Round, the final test of the Uruguay Round sought to include new areas such as trade in services. Till then, services had not been made an important part of the Gatt. So the final test, which was submitted on 15th December 1993, agreed to include trade in services as a part of the Gatt. And trade-related aspects of intellectual property, TRIPS, trade-related intellectual properties. Then trade-related investment measures, TRIMS. So TRIPS and services, trade in services, they were considered areas to be adopted or to be included in Gatt. So this is a significant change which was made in the Gatt agreement in 1993. So with this, we finish the discussion on Gatt. So we saw the meaning of Gatt. So what is Gatt? And after that, we discussed objectives, rules governing international trade under the Gatt agreement, and what are the principles of Gatt and evaluation of the Gatt. Then Uruguay Round, we discussed Uruguay Round in 2 slides. So here we finished the discussion on Gatt.